The Detroit Pistons regular season starts in just 2 days. So right before the season starts, let's have our final season preview to talk about the three most important players for the Detroit Pistons and what each player has to prove this upcoming year. And Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren. We'll talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. It's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And also, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Pistons Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right into your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with an all-new free Locked On Pistons newsletter today. That's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun creating that. It's a big thing Locked On's doing. I know you guys will really love it. So, again, make sure you guys go check out the newsletter and subscribe to it again at LockedOnDaily.com. It will be there for you 5 days a week, just like the podcast. So, in today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, I want to talk to you about three players, the three most important players for the Detroit Pistons this upcoming year and what they have to prove this upcoming year. I think it's no debating that the three most important players are Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and Jalen Duren for this season. We're going to go through each one and talk about what they have to prove. I do want to let you guys know, just to show how much I am committed and love making content for you guys. This is now my third time having to record this because StreamYard, where we record at, wants to not tell people when they go offline, apparently, or when they're going through maintenance. So now this is my third time having to record this. So that just shows you guys how much I care. Anyways, let's now get into it. Cade Cunningham, first person up. What does Cade Cunningham have to prove this upcoming year? I think it's very simple with Cade. This past year, Cade had a very successful individual season. Cade saw improvements across the board in his three-point shooting, in his overall efficiency. He got to the free throw line a lot more. His scoring went up. He averaged more assists per game. He was a better basketball player this past year. He had numerous stretches of just looking unstoppable on the offensive end, including stretches that right in the middle of December when he was trying to break the losing streak, multiple 40-point games. And then a good 3-week stretch, I believe, right after the All-Star break where he was the best three-point shooter in the entire NBA for a good 3-week stretch and was looking unstoppable. This past year saw Cade improve in just about every aspect of his game offensively. And nobody seemed to care. Nobody seemed to care nationally. No one seems to care still. And it's for one reason and one reason only. Because the Detroit Pistons have not won games. The Detroit Pistons won 14 games this past year. It was the worst season in Pistons history. Now, people like myself will tell you that none of it, or not none of it, but a lot of it did not fall on Cade at all. That the team's construction was terrible. People who looked at before the season objectively would tell you that it wasn't a good roster. I was never high in the roster. Monty Williams did just about as terrible of a job as you possibly could have seen a head coach do, which good luck, Monty, to coaching your son now in high school, which he just took that job off for, I believe, like 2 days ago. So good luck with that. Hopefully you have a little bit more passion for that than you did with the Pistons job. Anyways, the Pistons dealt with terrible roster management, terrible coaching. Cade shared 1,000 minutes with James Wiseman, 1,000 minutes with Killian Hayes. The roster was not good. So people like myself do not blame Cade for what happened this past year. However, it doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, this is a win or lose business. You have to produce wins, and if you want to have your respect, if you want to be accepted as a franchise player, if you want to be accepted as a top player in the NBA, you have to win games. Just a few episodes ago, I believe actually last episode, I recorded and talked about how Cade was snubbed and how Cade got absolutely disrespected by the ESPN Top 100 list. And the reception to that was, well, you know what? He hasn't won games, so how can you argue for him to be higher? At the end of the day, no matter what Cade does as an individual player, no matter what improvements he makes as an individual player, it has to translate to wins and losses, or he's not going to get that all-star nod. He's not going to get the respect that he deserves, and he's not going to be considered a franchise player like he's been paid to be. The only way you get that respect and you silence the doubters within the Pistons community and nationally is if you win basketball games. You have to have a better win-loss record than you've had at any other point in your career. I don't think many people are expecting the Pistons to win 40 games. I don't think they have to win 40 games for Cade Cunningham to get his respect. However, I think most people would say they have to be playing meaningful games in April, in March, where there's actually something to the game, where you're sitting there saying, if the Pistons can just win these few games, they might be able to squeeze into the play-in. They might be able to take that 10th seed. If they can get on a hot streak here and win the next 3 of these 4 games, they could squeak in. Like, they have to be playing games like that actually matter and not benching guys and sitting guys early because of injury. That is how Cade proves everyone wrong. That is what Cade has to do this upcoming year. That's what he has to prove, that he can be an impactful player, that he does impact winning, and he is the franchise player. And whether he averaged 25 points a game, 8 assists, and crazy efficiency, if it doesn't translate to the Pistons being a borderline play-in team with this roster, no one will care, and no one will say that he's a franchise player. People will still doubt him, and he will have proven nothing to his doubters. That's just the simple that's just the simple fact of the matter. That's how it's going to go, and that's how the only way he's going to change the narrative, the only way he's going to get his respect is by winning games. Now, I will say, preseason gave some good indicators. Now, look, I'm going to say this many times. I've said this many times over the last few weeks. Preseason is preseason for a reason. You don't want to read too much into it. You don't want to read too little into it. You want to try to find the perfect spot with preseason. However, it did happen. We watched those games, and we saw good indicators. In just those 5 games, 21 minutes a game he played, the Pistons were 11.5 points better with him on the floor. 115.6 offensive rating, 104.1 defensive rating. What you saw from Cade in the preseason, even in the first 2 games where he didn't shoot the ball incredibly well, he was finding guys open. He was orchestrating the half-court offense with ease and was looking like an absolute maestro out there. He was looking like the head of the half-court offense and was leading good offense despite him not shooting well in the first 2 games. In the final 3 games, when he did shoot well, he looked exceptional. He led the NBA in preseason in assists. Now, again, it's preseason, so take it with a grain of salt. But he led the preseason in assists while averaging just 1.6 turnovers a game. He kept the turnovers low, which I think had a lot to do with the spacing, and you'll start to see that play out even more during the regular season. Not as crowded driving lanes. He was orchestrating the half-court offense, whether it was out pick and roll, isolation, mid-post handoffs, mid-post pick and rolls. He was used in a multitude of different ways, which I think will lend itself to him being more impactful and winning and helping out the others flourish in what roles they could possibly flourish in. You saw good indicators to say this team could be a lot better, that Cade looks a lot better. He looks like he's been working on that floater. We saw him use some techniques in drawing some free throws. He was getting to the spots whenever he wanted to in the half court. He was being used in a multitude of different ways, like we were expecting to see coming out of college, where he just hasn't been really allowed to do that because of who he's been playing with. He's had to have the ball in his hands all the time. I think you'll start to see him be used in different ways like you did in preseason. You had good indicators from preseason that this could be a good year for Cade, that Cade is really impacting on the court. They were infinitely better when he was on the floor. You hope that translates, maybe not as badly. Hopefully, you want to hope that they don't just struggle immensely when he's off the floor. But either way, Cade looked like he was ready for the regular season. Cade looks like he's improved his game, and the roster around him has gotten better. The coaching staff around him has gotten better. So he should be able to lead this team to some wins this upcoming year. He should be able to lead this team to being better than what some people believe they will be. And if he does that, if Cade is able to lead them to 30-plus wins, 32 wins, and have them playing meaningful games in March and April and competing for that play-in, he will be an all-star this year. He will be considered one of the best players in the NBA. He will be considered one of the top guys under the age of 25, whatever those lists are, and he will get his respect as the Detroit Pistons franchise player, and he will be getting the respect as the Detroit Pistons franchise savior, like many thought he would be coming out of the draft when they drafted him number 1. But 25 points per game, 8 assists a game on incredible efficiency won't matter if it's coming from losses. If he's just losing games and the team is miserable again, no one will care. Nationally, people won't give him his respect. And there will be people within the Pistons community that say, who cares about the numbers? You're not leading us to wins. You can't be the guy. So that's the only way Cade's going to prove everybody wrong. He has to prove this year that he can translate to some wins. Despite the roster maybe not being great, have to get more wins than people expect you maybe to get. And we'll see if he's able to do it. I think he'll be able to do it. I have the utmost belief in Cade, but that's what he has to prove to his naysayers, to his doubters, to the national media to get his respect and start getting the accolades that he so desperately wants. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. Do you guys agree or disagree? Is there anything else you guys believe Cade has to prove that I did not mention for this upcoming year? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, what does Jaden Ivey have to prove this upcoming year for the Detroit Pistons? Not so much the fan base, but really, what does he have to prove to the front office to really guarantee that he should be here long term? Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with the big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can start with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Like I've told you guys many times before, a few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to try out. I tried out FanDuel. I have not turned back since. Not only is it super easy to use, it's super self-explanatory, and most importantly, it's a super fun to use. I'm using it years later. I'm still using it every Sunday football, Monday night football, Thursday night football, using it all the time. And you guys should too. Start over there at FanDuel. You will get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Make sure you guys are subscribing to our daily newsletter. You can find that over at LockedOnDaily.com. You can also subscribe to my personal YouTube channel at Kuka Hill, where I'll be breaking down my favorite plays from every Detroit Pistons regular season game. Sometimes it'll be my favorite plays if it's a bad loss. Sometimes it'll be plays that I really got frustrated by, that I thought maybe lost the Pistons the game or showed why they lost the game. You'll be getting daily, almost daily, I should say, film breakdowns from me over at my YouTube at Kuka Hill. So make sure you guys subscribe over there as well. I'd really appreciate it. And again, I'll shout out one more time our newsletter daily at LockedOnDaily.com. You can subscribe to the Locked On Pistons newsletter. Please go do that. I'd really appreciate it. You guys will love it as well. But Jaden Ivey, I think either the second or third most important Piston this year. It's either him or Jalen Duren, and Jalen Duren we'll talk about in a little bit. So whichever one, if you have him second or third, he is a top 3 most important player for the Detroit Pistons. And honestly, I think he probably has more to prove than Cade Cunningham. He might have the most to prove out of any Piston on the roster, Jaden Ivey, that is. And what is it that Jaden Ivey has to prove? I mean, there's improvements in his game that he has to make. There's certain improvements that, are more important than the others. There's a lot of things you could possibly say. But I think the main thing, if you were to summarize anything, if I had to just say one thing, if you asked me to give you one sentence to say, what does Jaden Ivey have to prove? Jaden Ivey has to prove that last season was not who he is and is not a representation of the player he's going to be. Because last year did not go very well for Jaden Ivey at all. He saw his 3-point shooting go down. He was nowhere near as efficient on catch and shoot threes. He did not improve enough as a finisher around the basket. He did not improve that much as a defensive player. You even saw him take steps back as a playmaker, steps back with the ball in his hand within the half court. He did not have a great season at all, a great second season for the Detroit Pistons. Now, a lot of people blame Monty Williams, and Monty Williams did a terrible job with Jaden Ivey. Monty Williams did a terrible job with the Detroit Pistons. He definitely played a part. But just like Cade shoulders part of the blame for how the Pistons won 14 games this past year, Jaden Ivey has to shoulder a lot of the blame for his own play. And Jaden Ivey has to prove that last year is not an indicator of who he is, and that was just a fluke season where he was not used in the best ability, when he had maybe the chips stacked against him by his own head coach, and dealt with an incredibly toxic situation, which did not help him improve his game. That's what he has to prove for the Detroit Pistons this upcoming year. And how can he do that? He can do it by playing exactly how he played in the preseason. Jaden Ivey was the most impressive Piston during the preseason. Now, again, like I've said over and over, preseason is preseason for a reason. Got to take it with a grain of salt. Don't want to read too crazy into it. Over the last, 14 years of me watching Pistons basketball all the time, religiously, I've seen many players play well in preseason, think you made the step, and then they don't. I've seen players not play well in preseason. You don't think they're going to make the step, and then they do when the season starts. You never really can feel 100% confident basing your evaluation off preseason. You can never, sometimes it does. Sometimes it means, sometimes what you see in preseason is what you end up seeing. You can't feel 100% with anything. However, we did watch those games. Those games did happen. We can't sit here and act like we didn't see what we saw. And what we saw was Jaden Ivey play exactly how everyone who believes in Jaden Ivey, everyone who thinks Jaden Ivey is the perfect backcourt mate with Cade Cunningham, he played exactly how they would want him to play, and even better. He shot 61% from the field, 53% from deep. He led the team in scoring at 15 points per game. He didn't do it on incredibly high volume either. He was incredibly efficient. He looked incredibly impressive. He was shooting at an incredibly high clip on catch and shoot threes, especially from the corners. He was shooting off the charts on corner threes, which could really unlock the Pistons' half-court offense to have someone that reliable in the corner spot from three and have it not just be a Tobias Harris. Having multiple players be able to drain corner threes at a high clip can really unlock your half-court offense. Along with that, he looked incredibly more poised on the ball. I think more impressive, though, was how well he played off of Cade, how well he played off ball at attacking open spots on the floor, whether it's through a slot cut, whether it's through filling in the open gaps from beyond the three-point line, whether it's just finding where the open gaps are in the mid-range and just attacking those areas and opening himself up to an easy pass to give himself an easy bucket. He was playing extremely well off ball, and something I think JB has done through preseason, which I think we're going to see obviously during the regular season, is he's probably going to get around 12 minutes, I would assume, with his own lineup on the floor. Maybe even more. He's going to get his own lineup without Cade on the floor. And we saw him play with spacing, and we saw him be able to attack an open floor, a spaced out floor, and whether he wants to hit a pull-up jumper or whether he wants to get to the rim, he had the utmost space possible to do whatever he wants, which is the best possible thing for his development. It puts him in the best position to succeed when he has a spaced out floor and players on the floor that can help him, whether it's with Cade helps him, but when Cade's off the floor, having players still on the floor that will help him. It looks like the situation right now is built for Jaden Ivey to have a better season. He's being given every chance possible from JB Bickerstaff and this front office to prove to them last year was an aberration, and this year will be the player I believe I really am. That is what Jaden Ivey has to do, and it's being sized up perfectly for him. He has the spacing. He has a coach that really believes in him. JB Bickerstaff has spoken glowingly of Jaden Ivey at every chance he possibly can get. Ivey, and again, with how he played in preseason, the indicators are good. They're showing good indicators that this could be a really special and fun season for not just Jaden Ivey, but the Detroit Pistons. Because if Jaden Ivey can play even close to how he played in the preseason, no one's expecting him to shoot 61% from the field for the year. No one's expecting him to shoot 53% from three on the year. Like, that's not going to happen. But if he can translate that success to what we would expect that would fall down to, like a 38% from the three, maybe like a 46, 45% from 46, 45, 47% from the field, an efficient basketball player, one who's able to attack off ball and be a good off ball player off of Cade, if he's able to do that, and then also another main thing he has to do is when Cade's off the floor, that's when the Pistons look their weakest during preseason. He has to show during the season that when Cade's off the floor, these lineups won't flounder and I can carry them. I can create for myself and I can create for others. We can survive on the floor. If he can do those things, he will prove to Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff and the Pistons fan base that last year was an aberration. This is who I really am, and you should commit to me financially next offseason. If he does that, they will commit to him next offseason financially. If he doesn't do that, and really, when you say must prove and what he has to do, it's because you have something at stake. If you don't have anything at stake, nothing really matters. What Ivey has at stake, I believe him and Duren are being evaluated before the trade deadline. If neither one of them, let's say what we saw in preseason from Jaden Ivey doesn't translate, which, knock on wood, everyone hopes it does, but let's say it doesn't. What he has at stake is the team could select to move on from him at the deadline and say, you're not the best fit and we shouldn't move forward with you. That's what he has at stake. If he plays how he played in preseason and it translates, he'll get that financial commitment from the Detroit Pistons next offseason. He will be the backcourt mate of the future with Cade Cunningham, and the Pistons will feel like they are back on track with their rebuild, heading in the right direction after what was the worst season in Pistons history this past year. And Cade Cunningham's at the top of that, but Jaden Ivey's right behind him, and what has to happen, what he has to show this Pistons front office, and what he has to improve on, and what he has to improve, or what he has to prove to everyone this upcoming year. He has to prove last year was not who he is, and this year will be who he actually is. Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Cougar Hill. Do you guys agree, disagree with what I had to say, or was there anything that I didn't say that you guys feel like should have been included? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Cougar Hill. When we come back, Jalen Duren, whether you have him second or third, top 3 most important Piston this year and top 3 Piston with the most to prove. He has to prove to this front office, after rumors this offseason of Isaiah Hartenstein, Nicholas Claxton, that he can be the big man of the future for the Detroit Pistons. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA and get on your way to being your best self. Halloween lets us have fun with what scares us, but what about those fears that don't involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy is a great tool for facing your fears and finding ways to overcome them. Because sometimes the scariest thing is not facing our fears in the first place and holding ourselves back. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Just like that. It's made to be extremely flexible, convenient for you, and entirely, again, online. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA for 10% off your first month at BetterHelp. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And now we move on to Jalen Duren, who, again, whether you have him second, whether you have him third, he is a top 3 most important player for the Detroit Pistons this upcoming year. And it's really quite simple with Jalen Duren. Really, really quite simple. I think Ivey has a few things that he has to improve on, a few things that he has to show the Pistons front office that he can do to buy in. Cade has a few things that he has to improve on to really make that next leap into what I believe he can be. Jalen Duren really just has one thing. It's really just one thing. And if he can do this one thing, he solidifies himself easily as the big man of the future for the Detroit Pistons. And everyone knows what this is. Become a better defensive basketball player. You have to be a better defender. The past 2 years, he has been a dreadful defender. This past year, he admitted himself at media day, he wasn't locked in at all times. He wasn't locked in on the defensive end, and he was a truly terrible defensive player this past year. And it sucks that was the case because he is such a talented offensive basketball player. He is an incredible finisher for his size. He's an incredible finisher at his position. He has an incredible handle for his position. He has a good passing ability for his position. He's a good playmaker for his position. You can run DHOs at the elbow with him for his position. He's really good at that. He's one of the best pick and roll men in the entire NBA. He's one of the best lob threats in the entire NBA. He's improved his footwork immensely. He's taken a big step at the free throw line. When he first started his career, he was a dreadful free throw shooter. Now he shoots around, 76, 79% from the free throw line. He shot 61% his first year. He shot 79% his second year. This is an offensive big man. This is a big man who is incredibly talented and gifted offensively. Jalen Duren is incredibly gifted offensively. He knows how to use his strength. He's incredibly strong. He knows how to use his length around the basket. He can drive himself to the rim from the elbow. You can run actions through it. He is an incredibly gifted offensive basketball player. However, none of that matters because he was so bad defensively. And it was so bad defensively. Again, you heard rumors of the Pistons potentially looking at Isaiah Hartenstein, potentially looking at Nicholas Claxton. There was talk throughout the offseason about both Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren from beat reporters from about the front office considering benching, either moving on or benching these guys for other guys they could go get. But they decided to give them another run to have a large impact on this team and have a chance to really improve and solidify their futures with the team. And like I said, with Jalen Duren, it has nothing to do with offense. It simply has to do, can you show us that you've improved defensively? Because if he does that, he will be one of the most promising young bigs in the entire NBA. Because that is how gifted he is offensively. This preseason, again, another player that gave you good indicators. He only had 5 blocks. He only averaged 1 block a game. However, it doesn't need to translate to blocks. It doesn't have to be 3 blocks a game. He simply was attacking shots at the rim. He was simply engaged around the rim. He was trying to deter shots at the rim. He was going after them. There were so many shots at the rim that he went after and tried to block, didn't get the block, but forced the miss because they got deterred from his length and his aggressiveness at the rim as a rim protector. That's literally all he has to do. And if he can just lock in at doing that, being more locked in as a rim protector, going after shots, blocking some shots, and just being active as a rim protector, he will easily solidify himself as the big man of the future for the Detroit Pistons. And Jalen Duren doesn't need to be Jared Allen defensively. He doesn't need to be Rudy Gobert defensively, Evan Mobley defensively. He doesn't have to be Mitchell Robinson defensively. He doesn't have to be that great defensively because he's more talented than most of those guys offensively. He's more gifted than most of those guys offensively. If he can just be a passable defender, if he can just be an aggressive defender around the rim and be locked in at all times, he will be one of the most promising young bigs in the entire NBA, and the Pistons will have a future all-star big on their hands if he can just improve defensively. All he has to do. Defensively. Just improve defensively, be aggressive, and just be locked in defensively. And that's all. And you've proven yourself. He will get committed to financially next offseason. And if he does that, just like with Jaden Ivey, it will translate to a lot more wins for the Pistons. The 3-4 game stretch where the Pistons looked their best, it was when Jalen Duren was actually active defensively, making an impact. They looked so much better. And as soon as he stopped doing that, they were awful the rest of the year. They were awful. And again, another good indicator from preseason. Read into it however much. Incredibly small sample size. Look, I understand. I get it all. But it's some good indicators. When he was on the floor for the Detroit Pistons in the preseason, just 18 minutes a game, he had a 109.5 defensive rating. Vastly improved over the last year. Pretty damn good defense when he was on the floor. He was a lot better in preseason defensively. He was just more engaged. He doesn't have to be a defensive playmaker. He doesn't have to be an NBA defender. He just has to be an active one. One that is actually locked in and cares on that end of the floor. And then you can get away with it because he's so gifted offensively. That's all they need. That's all he has to do. And he'll prove to the Pistons he's the big man of the future, and he'll get that contract next offseason. So, and the Pistons will win a lot more games. Helps everybody. So that's what Jalen Duren has to prove and how he can do it. Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at KookHill. Did I leave something out? Did you guys agree, disagree with any of these? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at KookHill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Hit that subscribe button at Locked On Pistons and my personal YouTube channel at KookHill. Also, subscribe to the daily Locked On Pistons newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. Really would appreciate that, and you guys would love the newsletter. I'm telling you guys, it looks really cool, really dope. You guys will enjoy it. Subscribe to all 3 of those places, or you can also leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Another great way to support the podcast. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Hopefully this recording actually saves. I don't have to do this a 4th time. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace out.